We just wanted to, express we are really excited about today's webinar. Very grateful to have Robert Pohl, Executive Director of Technology at Anacortes School District, joining us to discuss, his insights around leasing and how it has provided his school district flexibility in the uncertain times that we are facing. So to kick things off, I am going to pass it over to Colleen O'Donnell, Senior Vice President of Education with Insight Financial Services. Colleen, over to you.
Okay, great. So just a few minutes about Insight Financial Services. We work with school districts across the country to create refresh and lifecycle management strategies, really built around how to build a sustainable budget, something that's predictable so that your annual costs are known to all of the parties that are involved in deciding how technology gets implemented in schools. Our approach is really very consultative. What we try to do is build a long-term partnership with the district, with both the technology and the finance teams, so that we're able to build a full life cycle plan. So that's a little bit about us. I'm going to give it to Robert now to tell us a little bit about some of our goals for this session and some of the discussion topics.
All right, so hopefully everybody can hear me well. I'm sitting here in my home office today. So I'll just tell a little bit about myself. I'm obviously the Executive Director of Technology in the Anacortes School District. We are a small school district of about 7 schools in the Pacific Northwest, up in the, if you've ever been to the San Juan Islands or you know where Victoria, BC is, we are the gateway to that area of the country. It's beautiful, but it's also cold right now. We have about 2,600 students, about 200 teachers throughout the district. We serve K through 12, and we, like all of you, are also dealing with the effects of the pandemic on teaching and learning. And currently we have K through 3 in session with teachers on a AB cohort schedule. And then all of our grades 4 through 12 students are working and learning at home through hybrid learning. So we're dealing with the same challenges you are. One of the things that we couldn't have known when we started working with Insight Financial is how important that relationship would be in this time of crisis. We were able to do some amazing things in a very short period of time. And it was all tied to a different thought process, but it has helped us move forward in a way that the districts surrounding us in Skagit County, Snohomish County, and King County just haven't been able to do. So we feel like we're really blessed and fortunate. So one of the things in terms of our topics today, we're going to talk about how Insight Financial helped us upend our pilot program process to try this idea of moving away from a few chosen people who get all the resources to embracing technology in every classroom. We will talk a little bit about how I was able to provide return on investment of a big technology levy, which is a voter initiative to fund schools in a unique way, and how we were able to use that to really show the community that we were moving forward with our technology vision. Meanwhile, also for all of you who are in IT ops, how do you create a predictable technology refresh strategy and also support the reduction of fees and fines for students and families as an equity-based measure? And then finally, how we're navigating digital learning in this new era of learning that we find ourselves in. So hopefully I'll have a chance to address all of those topics. And I'll be able to answer some questions at the end as well.
Perfect. Thank you, Robert. So really, we're going to start with embracing the technologies for all. So I have a couple of questions for you really around, what were the challenges that your district was trying to overcome when we started this process a couple of years ago? What were the things that you were trying to accomplish?
Yeah, so in 2018, when I arrived to the Anacortes School District, it's actually my alma mater. I graduated from Anacortes High School, not the building you see behind, but the one that was there. One of the challenges that we had is that for the previous 4 years, they had tried multiple pilots. Basically where a classroom would get a set of iPads, and another classroom would get a set of Chromebooks, and another classroom would try a Windows tablet device, and another classroom. And across the district, we had all of these varying pilots with limited success in terms of teachers' use of technology and limited ability for us to support all of these unique scenarios that had been created district-wide as they were trying to figure out what to do to support technology integration at that time. What that did is it we had over 7 different make model of student devices in the district. So we were basically 2 to 1 at the time I arrived. And so if you can imagine having 7 different devices you're trying to repair and maintain, it was really tough. The other thing that we needed to do was this new high school that you see in the picture was recently built. It was equipped to be very modern, top of the line with interactive flat panel displays in every classroom. And the community really loved that. But in our elementary schools and our middle schools who had not had the benefit of a remodel, we're tech poor compared to this new high school building. And so there was a lot of concern from parents as well as staff that we were providing an inequitable experience across the grade levels. And then finally, we needed to standardize on our software and educational tools. We had everybody using free apps galore, and we really wanted to kind of standardize on a package of tools that would support creativity and productivity for all of our students, K through 12, not just in 1 or 2 spaces.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
So then, so that all ended up, so you had that project and then you were able to get this source of the technology levy funds, which your voters basically, voted to help you get these dollars, right? So you said, let me look at this in a different lens. Let me try to figure out how to leverage those dollars into an annual budget, right? And then how do I figure out how to accelerate and get everything that I need up front as opposed to having to wait? Because I think the levy is 4 years, right?
Yeah. So
okay.
Yeah. So I'll jump in there.
Okay, perfect.
So the one thing that as I came into Anacortes and I realized I was seeing all this disparity inequities with technology and its use across classrooms, a varied ability by teachers. One of the things that I knew we needed to do was be very thoughtful and proactive in our planning efforts. And what that required of us was to create and build an 8-year budget. Because I knew that if I was going to get buy-in from cabinet and from leaders, that they needed to see how we could pay over time for all of these big, grand, bold ideas that I had circulating in my head and that I convinced our superintendent we needed to do. So our budget, our annual operating budget, is about $180,000 a year. So I created a balance sheet that basically had that as a revenue source. And then we did a comparison. So we did a budget of leaving the way things are, or the way we've always done it, which is to set aside $40,000 of that $180,000 for repair costs, and $20,000 for this and $30,000 for that, all based on repairing old stuff. And then I created a duplicate spreadsheet that talked about what would happen if we were bold and we replaced everything with new and paid for it over time. And that's something that I did with Colleen's help. Our tech levy is also, we're really blessed to live in the area we live, and we have a strong community who supports schools. So we also receive about $1.8 million each year to support tech-related initiatives in the district. So I know that that's unique to us, but that's pretty common in the Pacific Northwest, where we are allowed to do those tech levies to get that additional dollars. That said, when we were looking at the budget, because of we're always under budget constraints, we had to move staffing costs into our tech levy. So when we were looking at actually just the cost for buying equipment and replacing equipment, modernizing equipment, of that basically $1.8 million, we really only had about, I would say $800,000 annually to spend on all of the things that we needed to spend on. Looking at that, we decided to go big and bold. We wanted to end the idea of a pilot for one classroom, a pilot for maybe the 5th grade team, because that's what we had done and we weren't seeing results from that. And so we decided to really upend that pilot process in terms of our budgeting. And so we decided that, typically looking at the life cycle and the refresh cycle of most technologies, we're on a 4-year cycle, and looking at change theory, knowing that also to get significant change, it's a 3 to 5 year process if you're consistently applying effort to that change process. So we decided to say, what would happen if we just chose to pilot with all of our teachers, K through 12, in all classrooms? And we called that project the Classroom Technology Makeover. And we implemented that in 2019. And I'll be able to speak more to what those different things were.
So just to clarify, so you did complete one-to-one for all classrooms. You did a complete transformation in terms of AV technology, right? And in all of the elementary and middle, you already had it in the high school, and then all teachers also got new devices.
Yeah, so in 2018, our first year that we worked with Colleen and team, we worked on replacing our staff devices district-wide so that everybody had the same laptop, whether you were the superintendent, teacher, or a custodian. So we worked through with Colleen on making sure that happened because we wanted to have great equity across the organization. Everybody could do everything that anybody else could do. And then we also wanted to make sure that at the end of that 2018, as we went into 2019, we could impact all classrooms district-wide to make sure that when voters passed the levy in 2018, 2019, when they saw the return on that investment. And it was return on investment in a very big way.
Yeah, perfect. I think we'll go to our, basically looking at building that predictable refresh strategy. So we're going to use this is Robert's way of describing this, which we have used a lot, which is creating creative financing as a catalyst for change. So it's really about all of the things that you were trying to achieve by leasing this technology, by kind of doing this big, bold vision. Can you just chat about kind of all of those things that helped you get there?
Yeah, sure. So one of the things that's very important to the Anacortes School District is we are heavily focused on our equity work. And what we needed to make sure is that all of our students, grades K through 12, well, pre-K through 12, had access to a device that could do all of the things that they needed to do to perform academically. So that was huge for us. We also wanted to make sure that all of our staff had the tools that they needed as well, so that there would be no inequities of access. We also wanted to make sure that in doing this, we had great consistency, because one of the things we learned through the pilot process in prior years, pre-2018, is that the inconsistency was keeping teachers from being able to share changes in pedagogy and practice in the way that they needed to. So if I was in an iPad classroom and I had this great idea, I could only talk to the other teachers who had iPads. They were spread throughout the district. What we needed elbow buddies. A teacher needed to be able to lean across the hallway and say, hey, what are you doing? And ask that good question and have those conversations with their colleagues in their school, and preferably just next door. So we wanted to do that. So that fewer deployment idea, we also wanted to, if we're going to disrupt the classroom in any way, and we know that when you add new technology, there's a disruption when you do that. We felt it was really important. Let's just do that once, and we'll disrupt everybody in a big way. But then that disruption is just once in a 4-year cycle, one time in a 4-year cycle, versus little disruption here, little disruption there, little disruption. Every time you add a new technology, there's a certain amount of effort that a teacher has to put into learning how to use that. We also said that this was going to be a 3 to 5 year project. So we introduced this to teachers in terms of that classroom technology makeover idea, that this would be a 3 to 5 year project. What we didn't know then in 2018 is that at the end of that school year, we would take a 3 to 5 year project and try to condense it in 3 to 5 weeks as we ramped up to online hybrid learning. And I can talk about that too. Software consistency, again, we wanted to make sure that if we wanted kids to create and tell their stories through video, that we had one single platform for that. If we wanted them to tell their story through audio and recording, We had a platform for that, and we wanted a consistent platform that would take us from K through 12. So that way kids, as they got better at tools, would rely less and less on their teacher and more on themselves to do their own learning. So that was really important to us. For our tech services team, the reliability was such a huge issue. When we went into testing my first year in the district, we had principals running around with devices trying to replace devices that were failing in classrooms. So we really needed to make sure that the device we chose was going to last 4 to 5 years in this life cycle, and that it could reliably work the same way every day without a lot of support by our tech services team. And then finally, I'll just wrap up on the PD side, is we knew that if we could standardize on all of these other things, our PD would also standardize, and it would help our teaching and learning team, our math coaches and our literacy coaches. They could also predict the environment that they were presenting into, because prior to this, they would have to take an idea, a pedagogy, a practice, and then they'd have to adapt it to the iPad room, and then they'd have to adapt it to the Chromebook room, and then they'd have to adapt it to the Windows tablet. And that was causing a huge amount of overhead in preparing just for PD sessions, and then the frustration of teachers who were then in those PD sessions not able to have good conversations because the technology was so significantly different.
I think one of the things that you did was really approach it from like really the whole entire district, like all of the things, right? So often we're involved in projects that are just involving student devices, or, you know, and I think the interesting thing of what you did was you looked at all of the things. Like, I think you mentioned the audio. There was an interesting story, I think, about was it at a board meeting, Robert, with the audio? Because it was something maybe with. Do you remember that? Do you remember that story?
Yeah, we had a family that they have a deaf child in their family, limited hearing, and one of the challenges of that child is that as they were moving into the middle school, the biggest concern that they had from going from 5th grade to 6th grade middle school was that the fact that we did not have audio systems in every classroom at that time. And they were really concerned that there wouldn't be an ability for that child to flexibly move from one space in the building to another space in the building as per their schedule, and be able to hear adequately to really participate in instruction. And that at that board meeting, because this is also a family I grew up with in Anacortes, I knew how passionate they were about that, and that really, really bugged me. So when we were thinking about what this classroom technology makeover needed to include, we needed to include tools for accessibility to make sure that content is accessible regardless of the disability that students have. And so that was a huge thing. And what I told the board at that time was that unless we're willing to do it for everyone, we shouldn't do it for anyone. And I stood firm on that, and luckily they didn't push me away on that. They felt as strongly as I did about that, and we were able to make the resources happen.
Well, I think your goal of equity is really true equity. That's why I remembered that story, just because I think it's not just, you know, it's having equity for all and being able to offer that to all of the constituents and all of the students and all of the teachers. So, you know, it was very exciting for us to be part of that project and that transformation in the district. So there was a couple, so I think what happened, right, by looking at that budget and really you taking the time to have the plan for the budget for 8 years, what happened was by being able to have annual payments with the leasing, you were able to then do some other projects that originally you did not think were possible. So one of those was the one that we were just talking about, which is all the multimedia AV displays. But there was a couple of other things that you were able to do, I think around PD and a couple of other things that maybe you can touch on.
Yeah, sure, definitely. So, I mean, I'll just share like one of the things that Insight was able to help us do is go to the manufacturers. So we were able to go to Boxlight, Smart Technologies, and all of those different big companies. And as a small district, leverage, you usually just don't have any. When you're only buying, you know, laptops in the quantities of hundreds, there's no leverage with HP on that. If you're buying the interactive panels, if you're only buying 5 this year and 5 next year and 5 the year after that, there's no leverage, there's no pricing leverage. But what we were able to do, like I'll just talk with the classroom project because I think that's what really released the funding that we could then apply to other areas, was we went to our partner, so the partner that we chose to use in our area is Advanced Classroom Technologies, and they represent multiple manufacturing partners. Boxlight is the one that we ended up choosing, but we were able to take a deal of 115 panels to them, and we told them that these are all the things that are important to us. We wanted audio systems. We wanted a document camera that integrated and was digital. We wanted the interactive flat panel with the onboard PC, so that way there was just fewer entry points. And we preferred a solution versus one-off items that we would try to figure out and patch together ourselves. And in that project, what was amazing is if we had done it the old way, which was buy 5 this year, 5 next year, and 5 the year after that until we finally get to most of a school, what we realized is when we priced that project out over the 4-year term, that the cost of that would have been close to $1.2 million if we had done it that way. By going to the vendors and the manufacturers right up front and saying, hey, this is the grand, big, bold thing we want to do with you. We are looking for a partner who's willing to help us. And we had Insight Financial. We knew we had the financing to do it. We were able to take that project that should have been $1.2 million and turn it into a $636,000 project through that effort, which more than paid for the cost of financing. And so we were able to take the basically $500,000 and change, and we were able to apply it to other projects that we thought in our tech levy and our planning would go unfunded. So one of the things with our new high school, we wanted to update all the CTE labs to the best and fanciest tech that we could afford to put in those spaces, and we were able to do that. We were also able, one of the big projects that went unfunded was the idea that we could add a video security camera solution at our middle school. And because we had saved so much money on that other project, we were able to do that too. We were able to increase the amount of technology that our staff had. Initially, it was just going to be a replacement laptop. But then we were able to add a docking station solution, monitors and keyboard, mouse, so that way they could sit at their desk and they could move with a laptop around the building. And we were able to do it for absolutely everyone. So by like working with Boxlight, working with Advanced Classroom Technologies, and working with Insight, and getting them all on board with the same vision we had, we were able to create something that we would not have been able to create if I had just gone out and used standard pricing through normal channels.
Perfect. Thanks for that description. And then I think we were able to also do so it was the second round doing the high school one-to-one, because I think they already had something existing, and then I think we were able to figure out how to budget that high school one-to-one in, right?
Yeah, we had to, with the devices that we had chosen, the high school was the earliest one-to-one. They had a device that was on a 4-year refresh cycle, but after the 3rd year, the devices were failing in a big way. We went from 1,400 functioning laptops to less than 900 in 2 years. And the cost to repair those, we were running into part shortages. So we had to do something pretty drastic. And so we were able, because of the savings and being able to leverage big buy, we were able to get our high school accelerate the schedule of replacement a year and a half early.
Perfect. That's great. And we did that. Did we do that in March? When did we did it?
Yes, in the throes of COVID, we did that in March and April of this last year.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, this year we did it in March of April this year, Colleen.
Right.
I know it feels like that was 2 years ago. I know, it's funny.
Completely. So, I think this is a question that we get from a lot of districts, which is, how do I explore this? Like, what are the things, what advice would you give? Because it's definitely something that has not been historically done. I mean, I think that leasing is certainly growing in school districts. That's what we've seen. That really trying to build a life cycle plan is one of those things that's super important to every school district. Can you give some advice on kind of how you started the process? What you did to make it successful for you?
Yeah, so one of the first things that I did is I got well versed in our vision, mission, beliefs, and values. So I was new to Anacortes. They had their strategic 5-year plan, and I made sure that when I would talk about any of the big, bold things that we were doing, that I aligned it to the vision, mission, and values of the organization. So one of the things, as we were talking about this big, bold plan that we were thinking through in the classroom technology makeover, one of our belief statements is we believe in being bold. And so when I presented that to the school board, I started with that statement. I said, statement number 4, we believe in being bold. We believe in doing big things in benefit of kids and learning. And so I started our presentation with that. So I used their language to help build support of the project. I also worked with our assistant superintendent, our superintendent, the teaching and learning team to get them bought into the idea. I also had to show them how we could finance the project over the 4-year cycle. So I had to be very clear about, I already knew the plan for all 4 years. There were going to be no surprises in terms of what this would cost. And I had to show them that we could afford it if we changed how we did things. That was really important.
We had a lot of spreadsheets.
Yes, a lot of spreadsheets.
To try to figure it out.
Yes. The other thing that we focused on is equity, making sure that by this big, bold plan, how we were including everyone, our special ed classrooms, our students with disabilities, we were including everyone, no stone went unturned to try to identify all of the needs, because I did not want something coming out of the woodwork. Because the one thing that you have to be thinking about when you're doing this idea of leasing is if you do make a mistake or forget, you have kind of tied up your funding in a unique way. And now there are ways to adjust and change, but we wanted to make sure that all of that work had been done pretty significantly. So we knew that our speech language pathologists, they wanted iPads for therapy. So we knew that, so we could bring that into the project. So we had done all of that legwork in 2018 to get people on board with this idea. I will say, luckily, our finance, because you do have to work with your finance people, it helps to speak their language. So bringing Colleen in to work with Dave and that team to talk about the benefits of financing, bringing him to, I had basically had to build balance sheets so I could show him what the cost of financing would be over the 4-year term. I had to show him what the cost would be for doing the project with the financing and then what we're saving. And so every time I could show him that I was saving more than $100,000 by doing it the new way, he was on board. And so he became a huge advocate with the school board to say, we can't, like he even said in one meeting, we can't afford not to do this. Like, this is so essential we do it this way that the finance department wouldn't consider doing it any other way. And that was key and pivotal, especially when we went into the purchase of the Chromebooks for our elementary students, because that was a big purchase.
That's a big one. Can you talk about, some of the leasing terms, like how you were able to explain the life cycle strategy?
Yeah, so one of the things that we worked really hard to do is because of the way we had to do the projects initially, we had multiple life cycle end dates. So the first round of devices, we knew that we wanted to refresh on a 4-year cycle for all of our student devices and on a 3 to 4 year cycle for our staff devices. And so what was great, we also had to match that schedule with our levy collection payment. When the voters pay, we get money in October, we get money in April. And so working with Colleen again and team and saying, hey, we'd really like to structure our payments twice a year to match our levy collection cycle. So they were great. They were able to help us do that. So we make a payment in November and we make a payment in May, I believe. May each. To match that collection cycle. And that was also really important for our finance team because in the past, they had basically been banking the dollars until we had enough to buy the thing. So it always put us buying stuff at the end of the year for next year. at the end of the year for next year. So it's like, it was just always so frustrating. We can't do anything about the problem right now, so we'll wait till the summer and then we'll do something next year. So we were able to kind of say, no, we get the stuff now and we'll pay for it later.
Right. Perfect. Perfect. Okay. I think the only other thing on here was maybe just talking about OETC, which is a national cooperative, but it's also pretty local to you. So maybe just how we were able to utilize that to help you accomplish what you wanted to accomplish.
Yeah, that was really key for to move forward on the project, because with a leasing project, typically in the past, prior to this agreement with OETC that you guys won, we would have had to go out to RFP for the financing of this project. And there, we had looked at financing from Dell, we had looked at financing from another vendor, and then obviously Insight. But what made this so compelling is because Insight already had the relationship with OETC and we're members of that cooperative, we were able to just take that and say, we don't need to go and do an RFP, which saved us months of legwork and having to really explore the details. So that was super helpful with that. And they've been super flexible. I'll just say Colleen and team, Insight Financial as a company makes the money work the way you need it to work, and to make it easy for you to move forward. So for some of our equipment, we have $1 buyout, and some of our equipment we own outright at the end of the lease cycle, and some of our equipment will return to Insight at the end, based on its life cycle and how we plan and intend to use it.
Perfect. I think that's what we're trying to do, is always just match the useful life to the equipment. Try to build a plan that allows you to do what you need to do, right? And that's I think, like, we do have, like, as I think you mentioned, like, we do have like a slightly different term for the staff devices that we do for the student devices. It's all about just matching the tools and then making sure that you have the right tools 3 or 4 years from now. I mean, I think that's one of the things that's really important as we research this and really look at how the classroom is changing, even not before COVID, but now certainly with COVID, that learning has changed. Having the right device that completely has all of the things that the students need, but then also having a full plan to refresh it so that you're not stuck with old, outdated equipment. So that's really what our goal is in terms of trying to build a plan. I think this next one is this is really just about kind of what happened with tickets. You, I think, talked at the beginning of how there were 7 different models and kind of what happened. This is an organic thing that happened that maybe wasn't initially on your list, but I think it's a really important one in terms of what happened here.
Yeah, those unintended consequences and impacts to other people and programs that you hadn't anticipated. So one of the things coming into Anacortes, we are a small tech support team. There's 6 of us, and 2 people to support staff or student devices, 1 person to support staff devices, and then our network and systems admin team. Prior to this classroom technology makeover idea, the team spent most of their day, every day, fixing broken stuff. They had very little time to actually do higher level work because they were always just trying to repair someone reporting something broken. And that was really daunting for this team. So when you have really smart people who are focused on really low level work, the motivation of the team, the inspiration to come to every work, unless you're really dedicated and you understand that this is all about students. And but in the end, there were sometimes they would be put between a rock and a hard place where they just couldn't fix it. It was too broken, it was too old, it was too whatever, and they would have to be the bearer of bad news to teachers and students and staff, and it always put them in a bad place. So post classroom technology makeover, we worked really hard to get everything ready for fall 2019. And they took a huge risk because they're like, wow, this is a lot of change. This means we're going to have to retool. We're going to have to rethink. We're going to have to change our processes in terms of what we do. There was a lot of thought around, well, gosh, if my job is always about fixing broken, what's left? And so I had to convince the team that, no, actually, there's really more interesting work helping people learn how to better utilize working tools. So initially we had high tickets, and then we hit mid-year, and we had really low tickets because all of a sudden all of the things that we had hoped would happen happened, and they had time to start doing more interesting work. Um, uh, to my in the picture, Ray, who's behind me, in the black shirt, he was able to start looking at other device management solutions. So we were able to implement Jamf, we were able to implement Intune, we're implementing Google Chrome Admin Console, and he's doing that work now. So instead of fixing Chromebooks, which he would have been doing in the past, or fixing old laptops and technologies, now he's actually behind the scenes tweaking and configuring devices to make them work better in the classroom for our kindergartners versus our 12th graders. And that was really strategic and helpful, and it really helped improve our team's morale because now they feel like they're part of the solution, not part of the broken problem.
So COVID hit. And I remember you and I having a conversation about it, but it's like, but your position was one that was really interesting because you really didn't have to figure out how. It was kind of like, well, all right, when do we want to start? So maybe talk about just how this program helped you and kind of what happened.
Like everyone in the nation, when schools shut down in March of it was just March of this year, wasn't it?
Yeah, but it's a really long year.
It's a really long year. So when our schools closed in March, we were already one-to-one with brand new devices. We did not, one of the positives is we just basically had to we were cart-based in the elementary schools. We had to decommission our carts, but we were able to pass them out to kids with very little interruption. And that was really, I can't even, while other districts were scrambling to buy devices, we were scrambling to get them to kids. And so we were able to basically implement an online learning model. When schools closed March 13th, by March 15th, everybody had a device and was participating in online learning and consistency. So we were able to manage devices remotely because, again, we had made some decisions about standardizing tools. We had implemented GoGuardian as our web filter, suicide prevention, as well as our device management and classroom monitoring tools with GoGuardian Teacher. Teachers were able to monitor devices at home. So kids if they were online, they could pull them into a video conferencing session, even if they hadn't chosen the link themselves. And teachers, so in this picture, you've got Mr. and Mrs. Swap, who are in the district, and their 3 kids. This is their home office. And so you've got Mrs. Swaps there with she was able to take her digital document camera home so she can present lessons in that way, but she also has video camera recording capabilities, and she was able to present, and her husband was too. And her kids were able to participate in their learning using the devices. So it was the only thing that I would say that, and this wasn't an insight thing, while we could get devices to kids, we could get equipment home to teachers. What it allowed our team to do is focus on some of the other things that needed to be done. We weren't scrambling for devices. We were scrambling for hotspots for those families who needed internet. And I will say that although that was a challenge and a problem, it wasn't as big a challenge as trying to find 3,000 laptops if you don't have them.
Right, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, and I think one of the other things too, I'll just say here, is that Firefly also worked with us to get that. We also realized pretty quickly that the devices we had that got sent home with our high schoolers weren't going to cut online learning in the fall, and we were able to work with them and you, Colleen, to get those devices a year and a half early, just serendipitously.
Yeah, perfect. Okay. I think that's where we are. There's you on the first day of school.
Right. Stacked with my boxes.
A lot of boxes, right. So I don't know if we have any questions. Right.
Yeah,
I think
we do.
One or two. Okay.
Yep, we do have one. So thanks, Robert.
Okay.
So the first question that has come through was, what was the process of changing your mindset and your district's mindset from an annual budget to a life cycle focused budget.
One more time, if you would.
Yeah, no worries. So, what was the process that you went through to change your mindset and the mindset of your, of the rest of the district from an annual budget to a life cycle focused budget?
Sure. I wish there was, I'd like to say, I mean, I think everybody, if you're only working on an annual basis, you're doing a disservice. And because you really don't know how, you're not predicting far enough out in the future for what teaching and learning needs. And so that's something, but honestly, where that came from for me, and the reason why I felt it was so strategic and important is because I knew I had a lot of people to convince. And if I couldn't show, you have those that are more traditionally minded, the people who want to go bold are easily convinced. Like you share some great idea and they're right with you right away. If they are change and innovator, if they've got that mindset, they don't care how it's paid for. They just love the vision of it. And then there are those that are more traditional conservative who just need to know, hey, we are on board with you, but you need to be able to make it work over time. We need to see that this isn't just a flash in the pan because we've been burned in the past with flash in the pan ideas and flash in the pan thinking. So really having that 4-year cycle, and actually in our situation, we're now out to 8 years out, planning and preparing and making sure that we can do some things because we want to do some even bolder and bigger things in the next tech levy cycle than we currently have done. But because now we're thinking that far out, we're able to plan for that replacement levy in 2022. We've got some big, bold plans for that. We already know how we're going to pay for it. We already know how we're going to structure the projects. And so doing that really helped. But I will say it was also, I was getting my MBA at the time, which was something that I'd always wanted to do. And so it was also a project that helped me think far enough out about thinking through the total cost of ownership of things over time.
Great.
I think, I mean, if I can, I was just gonna, just having been involved in the process with you, Robert, I do think that you not only were able to demonstrate how it would change teaching and learning, which obviously is one of the primary goals for the district, but the other thing is that you were able to back it up with numbers, right? So those two things are super important, right? So we were able to work together to try to figure out the numbers, right? And that was not like, oh, this is super easy. It was like, let's try to figure out how to work within this. Let's use some, let's use some examples. Let's try to figure out what we can do within the constraints of the money. And then I think you also mentioned one of the real benefits was that because you had some leverage because of the size of the transaction, that ended up, helping us make it affordable, help us show that this provided the district not only with a life cycle management and some real good predictable budget, but also some savings. So
right.
All of those things I think really helped anybody that had the mindset of I wasn't sure I wanted to do it. You were able to back it up with not only technology advances and how that would help teaching and learning, but also how it would help from a financial perspective, meet the budget objectives, meet the annual budget objectives, but then also save the district some dollars by implementing a strategy like this. So I think
that was really huge in that process because we worked long and hard on that front end of things. Making sure all of the things. So we had the essential projects outlined. So we knew we needed to do a staff device replacement. We knew we needed to do a student device replacement. And then there were a whole bunch of second priority projects. And then there was a whole list of third priority projects. And by doing that 4-year budget, we were able to go, wait a minute, it looks like we can do all of the primary projects. And guess what? Wow, all of the secondary projects are now affordable too. And then we started taking off the third priority projects and realized quickly that we were able to fulfill most, like 70% of those third tier projects by doing this. And so once I was able to, show the finance office, show the superintendent, show building principals, show all these people that if we do it this way, we can get almost everything that anybody had wanted out of this tech levy cycle. And we can do it in a year. which
Yeah.
now sounds crazy even to myself. I'm like, but let's go bold, let's do it. And we did. And, again, it was strong partners. So manufacturer partners, vendor partners, um, finance partners, and then, basically a district who said, sure, why not? We can't afford to do this any other way. We were able to meet a lot of needs. And I, sometimes I get a little emotional about this, but we couldn't have been in a better place when COVID started. And I can't imagine where we'd be if we hadn't done what we had done. Like my life would
Right.
be really different right now.
Yeah. Yeah. It would.
And
It
kids'
would.
experience of school would be very different in Anacortes right now. And teachers'
Yeah.
experience trying to navigate online learning for the very first time in history would be very different right now. And
Right.
we have a community who feels that the tech dollars were spent well. They have appreciated that we get phone calls. It's been amazing.
Good. So glad. Any other questions, Brian, or?
I think that is a great place to end. That was
Okay.
a very nice, very well said, Robert. So,
Yep.
anything else, Robert or Colleen, that you would like to say before we close out the webinar?
I would just
I just want to
encourage
say, oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead. I
Go
was just
ahead.
going to say, anybody who wants to reach out to me, my contact information is there. I'm happy to share with you how we built out the plan, my budget spreadsheets, any of those kind of like the working details, because I feel like, let's share and share alike to kind of help you plan and prepare for what that looks like to do a 4-year life cycle and 4-year budget planning. I'm happy to help with any of that. If you're interested in coming and visiting when COVID releases, can do that, or we can even schedule time and with individuals who can talk more about their experience firsthand as a student or teacher. We're happy to coordinate, collaborate in that way as well.
Thank you. I was just going to say, grateful, Robert, for you telling your story, for the partnership that we have. I really appreciate it. And thanks, everybody, for joining.